It was a quiet morning by the lake, the kind where the water barely ripples and the sun casts golden streaks across the surface. But peace never lasts long when Karen's around. Without warning, a sleek white boat glided into the dock, not just any dock, but his dock, the one he paid for, maintained, and protected. The woman behind the wheel wore oversized sunglasses and entitlement-like armor. She docked her boat with zero hesitation, ignoring the private property signs as if they were invisible. He stepped out of his cabin, stunned. "Excuse me," he called out, trying to keep calm. "This is a private dock." Karen didn't flinch. She tossed her hair, pulled out her phone, and dialed 911. "I'm being harassed," she told the dispatcher, her voice dripping with false victimhood. "This man is threatening me for docking my boat." And just like that, the storm had begun. As Karen's voice rang out through the phone, neighbors peered from porches, drawn by the sound of conflict. He stood firm, arms folded, trying to stay composed while she spun her story. "She's claiming harassment," the officer on the line repeated, as though he were the aggressor. Karen paced dramatically beside her illegally docked boat, gesturing wildly. It wasn't fear, it was theater. She wanted control, wanted attention, and she was getting it. He pointed to the large, bold private dock. No trespassing sign behind her. The dispatcher hesitated. "Is this your property?" "Yes," he replied, and still, she stayed. Because for Karen, consequences were just inconveniences that hadn't caught up to her yet. With the dispatcher still on the line, Karen turned toward him, her voice growing louder, more theatrical. "You can't intimidate me," she said, as if reading from a script written in her own imagination. He didn't move. His presence was quiet, deliberate. "I'm not intimidating you," he replied. "I'm reminding you this dock isn't public." Karen raised her phone again. "They'll be here soon. You'll regret this." A few curious teens on jet skis began drifting closer, drawn by the drama. One of them whispered, "Is this about the boat lady again?" She turned toward them. "You key back." The lake, once calm, now shimmered with anticipation. The first ripples of backlash were spreading. She had made a scene, and soon the scene would answer back. The sirens broke the morning stillness, like thunder cracking the sky. A patrol car pulled up slowly, its tires crunching over the gravel, as two officers stepped out. One was calm and observant. The other had the look of someone used to sorting out petty disputes. Karen marched toward them before anyone else could. "Speak." "He threatened me," she declared, voice shaking but not from fear, from rehearsed outrage. The officers exchanged glances, then turned to the man by the dock. He simply nodded, toward the sign once more. "Private dock," the calmer officer murmured, reading aloud. "So, what's the emergency?" Karen faltered for the first time. Her expression flickered, searching for footing. He yelled at me." "No shouting," the officer confirmed. "No threats." Karen looked down at her phone, then up again. "Well, no. But I felt unsafe." Behind her, the jet skis circled closer. The lake was watching now, not with sympathy, but with curiosity. She had called for help, and help had arrived to question her. The distant wail of sirens split the air, echoing off the lake like a warning bell. Karen's smug smile grew as flashing lights came into view. She stood tall, arms crossed like a queen awaiting loyal subjects. But this wasn't a coronation. It was an investigation. The officer stepped out, eyes scanning the scene. One glance at the dock sign, another at the crowd forming on the shoreline. Jet skis circled gently nearby, like sharks sensing blood in the water. Karen launched into her rehearsed tale, painting herself as the victim. "He's threatening me over a dock," she insisted. The officer turned to the property owner. "Do you have proof this is your dock?" He handed over the deed, silent and resolute. There was no drama in the officer's next words, just cold. "Truth, ma'am. You're trespassing." Karen's smile faltered. Karen stood frozen, the word trespassing still hanging in the air like thunder. She tried to argue, but the officer's posture had shifted, no longer tolerant, now investigative. And then came the roar. One by one, jet skis began circling the dock, teenagers and locals alike, united by a silent message. Not today, Karen. They didn't shout or threaten, they simply surrounded her BMW, parked boldly on community land. The hum of engines created a chorus of quiet resistance. Karen's expression shifted from smug to stunned. "This is harassment," she cried, but the officer didn't move. The crowd was no longer amused. They were watching justice swirl across the lake in the form of coordinated defiance. She had brought the storm. The lake answered. Karen blinked at the officer's words, as if disbelief could erase reality. "Excuse me. I called you. I'm the victim." But the officer wasn't swayed. He had seen enough lakeside theatrics to recognize when the show was over. He glanced at her boat, then the property deed, and finally her defiance. "You docked illegally, ma'am." "I didn't know," she muttered, her voice losing its edge. "You passed 2 private property signs." Karen looked to the crowd now, watching her undo herself. The teens on jet skis chuckled under their breath, and the man who owned the dock remained silent, his calm more powerful than any words. This wasn't just about a boat anymore, it was about boundaries, and hers were starting to collapse under the weight of her own ego. As the officer gave Karen a final warning, a rumble rose from the water. One by one, the jet skis formed a loose circle around the dock. Their engines purred like a rallying drumbeat. It wasn't planned, wasn't organized, but it was personal. Karen's BMW sat parked nearby, glossy and untouched, but the riders had a different idea. In a burst of motion, they peeled off the shoreline and began orbiting the luxury car in tight loops, spraying water and spinning like guardians of justice. She watched in horror, mouth agape. "You can't do that," she shouted, voice shrill and cracking. "They're not touching it," the officer said calmly. But the message was clear. This wasn't revenge, it was resistance. Karen had disrespected the lake, the dock, and the people who called this place home. And now, they were speaking her language. Spectacle. Karen's BMW gleamed under the morning sun, a symbol of her status and self-image. But now, it was encircled by jet skis, like a prized trophy, one that nobody wanted, yet everyone watched. The riders didn't touch the car. They didn't need to. They spun, drifted, danced in the water like choreographed rebellion. Each move a message. "You don't own this place." Karen ran toward her car, clutching her designer purse, shrieking at the riders. "You're harassing me." One rider slowed, raised 2 fingers in a mock salute, and vanished into the water mist like a ghost of poetic justice. The officer stood nearby, unmoved. "Ma'am, you brought this on yourself." Karen's world, built on control and complaint, was unraveling one jet ski at a time. Karen backed away from the shoreline, her heels sinking into the damp grass. Every glare, every laugh, every ripple in the water chipped away at her facade. The neighbors weren't sympathizing, they were filming. Phones tilted in her direction, capturing her outrage, her unraveling, her disbelief. One video, already posted, was gaining views. HOA Karen gets schooled. The caption read. She lunged toward one of the teens. "Delete that now." But the teen just smiled. "Too late. You're famous." The officer intervened, gently stepping between them. "Ma'am, I suggest you leave before this escalates further." She stared at her BMW, her boat, and the lake that refused to bend to her will. The empire she built on superiority was crumbling in real time, and the audience was larger than she ever imagined. Karen's breaths came short, panicked. The power she thought she had, calling the police, commanding attention, had turned against her. She started for her BMW, unlocking it with trembling hands. But the crowd wasn't done watching. They weren't laughing now, they were silent. Judgment hung heavy in the air, invisible but suffocating. She glanced at the officer one last time. "This isn't over," he replied with cool finality. "It should be." Her boat sat stranded on the dock. Her story, once twisted and bold, now lay exposed and threadbare. She had come to dominate the shoreline but left, as its cautionary tale. The jet skis hummed softly in the distance. Their protest finished but not forgotten. With the engine of her BMW rumbling softly, Karen lingered, for just a moment, caught between fleeing and facing. But the lake didn't care. It had already moved on. Ripples spread gently across the water where her boat sat, abandoned. It rocked slowly, almost mockingly, like the lake itself was shrugging her off. The jet ski riders returned to calm drifting, chatting and laughing now that the storm had passed. The tension was gone, but the memory remained. He stood on his dock, watching Karen drive away, her tires kicking dust over a shoreline she'd tried to claim. The officer nodded toward him, a silent gesture of respect. No citations, no arrests. Just a moment where truth had spoken louder than entitlement, and from somewhere deeper in the lake, a loon creta, lonely sound, full of echo and consequence. The lake was still again, as if absorbing the chaos that had passed. But on the dock, something had shifted, not in the wood or the water, but in the people. Neighbors gathered quietly near the property line, offering subtle nods to the man who had held his ground. No cheers, no applause, just quiet reverence for someone who stood tall without shouting. One of the jet ski riders pulled up, engine humming low. "You handled that like a legend," he said. He smiled faintly. "Just protected what's mine." Karen was gone, her car a fading memory down the trail road, but her presence lingered like a cautionary tale stitched into lake lore. The officer stepped into his patrol car. Before he left, he said, "This place doesn't need more rules. It needs more people like you." And as the lake gently lapped at the dock, it whispered a quiet thank you. Days passed, but the echo of that morning clung to the lake like mist at dawn. The water held memories, not of names or faces, but of moments, of conflict, of courage, of clarity. The man continued life as usual, clearing the dock, maintaining his space, watching the horizon. But whenever he paused, he could feel it, the shift. Respect had replaced tension. The jet ski riders came and went. No more loops around BMWs, just nods and waves as they passed. The lake had spoken once, and it didn't need to repeat itself. Karen's boat was eventually towed, her name slowly forgotten. But the story lived in the quiet conversations on porches, in the glances between neighbors, and in the calm ripple of water against the dock. Not out of revenge, not out of ridicule, out of remembrance. Karen's name faded, but the story didn't. It became legend not because of drama, but because of how it ended. With dignity, the man didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He simply lived. Each sunrise brought calm to the dock, where it all began, where respect had been quietly earned. Occasionally, someone would ask, "Were you the guy from that jet ski video?" He'd nod, maybe smile, but never linger on the moment. His victory wasn't loud, it was in the silence, in the still water, in the absence of conflict. The lake, ever watchful, held the story like a secret tucked beneath its surface. Some tales are shouted, others are kept. This one was remembered. The dock became more than a place, it was a symbol, not of confrontation, but of calm strength. Every wave that touched its edge felt like an echo of resolve. Teens who had once laughed from their jet skis now greeted the man with respect. A local boy even asked, "How'd you stay so chill through all that?" He smiled. "You don't fight fire with fire. You wait for the wind." The story passed quietly from person to person, not to ridicule Karen, but to remind matter. Respect matters. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than any siren. Karen's chapter was closed. But the lesson she left behind became a ripple. One that taught a community how to hold space, how to defend peace without losing it. And the lake, it just kept remembering. The seasons changed. Spring melted into summer, and summer into golden fall. But the dock remained silent, strong, unchanged. Sometimes visitors asked about the day the jet skis formed a circle, or the woman who called 911 over a dock she didn't own. But those who lived it rarely told the story the same way. It wasn't just about what happened, it was about what it revealed. The man never sought attention, but he became a quiet example. A reminder that dignity doesn't need drama, and peace doesn't need permission. His dock became a place not just for boats, but for learning, remembering, respecting, and the lake. It kept its rhythm. Its water still held the echoes of Karen's chaos. But more than that, it held the strength of a man who didn't flinch. Legacy isn't loud, it lingers.